Good morning, everybody. This is Lizzie Jones, and this week I'm going to talk to you about using vellum to soften background patterns, either pattern papers or stamped patterns. I'm also going to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about different ways to attach vellum so you don't have any visible adhesive, since I know that that's a question I've seen popping up in the paper traying forum lately a couple of different times. So we're going to start today with, let's start with this one. So we're going to do an all-over vellum layer for this one. Say you start with a pattern paper or a background stamped pattern. You spent a lot of time on it, but when it was finished, it was a little bit bolder than you wanted it to be. And you just want to soften it a little bit. No biggie. So we're going to take a piece of vellum here. And we're going to just lay that over top of the pattern piece so you can still use the opening that we've got here. And I'm just going to use my Versamarking pad and this large hugs image. And we're going to go ahead and stamp that here. I'm also going to add the sending right above the hugs, right there. If you'll give me just a second, I'm going to go heat emboss that with some gold powder, and I will be right back. So here we have our sentiment. It's been heat embossed with gold powder. There you go. And you can see, if you lay it right over top there, you still have it highlighted in the space. Still got it in that space that I masked off. But the pattern is much more subtle. It's much softer, which just gives a nice lightness to it a little bit, I think. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and attach this patterned piece to a spring moss card base. There we go. And now comes the attaching part. So this is vellum tape. I've used it for quite a while and I like it well enough. I mean, it does a good job. You don't see the adhesive, you know, once it's all attached. It's really thin adhesive, and it comes on this backing paper. And it comes in a clamshell, and you really want to hold on to this because anything that gets stuck to that exposed adhesive on the edges is going to show up on your projects. So we're just going to take it the length of the card here. I tend to prefer to put vellum tape on whatever my project is rather than, or like the base, like the cardstock I'm attaching it to, rather than on the vellum, because I think it has a tendency to show up even less. And you're just going to burnish it. I'm just using the end of a bone folder here. Okay. You're going to peel off the backing paper, and it leaves that little strip of sticky adhesive there on the top edge. I'm just going to do the top edge because I kind of like the way that it looks with a little bit of a fluttering top layer. But you can feel free to attach yours all the way around the edges if you prefer. There we go. And there you can see, there's where our adhesive went, but you really can't see it at all because of that special adhesive. this is the Scotch vellum tape. So that's an option for adding vellum if you want to go the adhesive route. And there's an all over coverage. You still see the pattern through it, but your sentiment really pops, and it just softens just enough, you know. So there's option number one. Option number two today is, say you have this pattern that you really want to show off. I used strawberry patch for this, and I did some rock and roll, and I'm afraid that if I covered it up all the way, you wouldn't see any of those details that I put into the stamping. So we're going to do a partial coverage. So here you can see our vellum's just going to cover up a little section in the middle. And I'm using the Text Block Mom today. Now I die cut this after Xyroning, so it's sticky all the way around the back. So I'm just going to peel off the adhesive here, or peel off the backing rather. And the nice thing about using like a text block die, for example, or a cover plate, or phrase play, is that you've got this border around the outside edge that's going to allow you to hide your adhesive. Make sure it's nice and stuck. And then you can decide sort of which orientation you want to use. I like to go the other way. And we're going to go ahead and stick this down to a card base. Also a spring moss card base here, just like the first card. This one's got a little bit of an edge around it though, so you can see the card base popping out around the edge. And now, in order to attach this, we're going to use a little foam tape around the back edge here. My giant roll of foam tape. And then cut strips, narrow strips, about 1/8 of an inch wide, that can fit behind that frame. Now some of the other dies that I mentioned are a little bit more delicate, some are a little bit wider, so you'll just have to play with the placement and see how, you know, what works best for you in terms of where you hide your adhesive. But you can find some place almost on every die that's going to be discreet enough to hide your adhesive. And there you have a little peekaboo around the edge, and you can just see on the inside of that text block through the vellum, you can see that the pattern continues, but it's not as strong, so you can see the sentiment a little bit better. There's that one. That's option 2. And we have our third one. So let's say you worked on your pattern for a really long time, or you know, it's a pattern paper that you adore and you just cannot imagine covering it up. This third option is a great way to sort of get the best of both worlds. So you're going to set off your sentiment a little bit, but you're really going to see the vast majority of your pattern. So for this one, we've got a vellum sort of flag banner that I've heat embossed with the sentiment from Putting Down Roots, the same set that I used for the background pattern. And again, you know, if you've like really spent a ton of time on something, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to cover it up. So this is a great option. So I heat embossed my sentiment on my vellum flag, and then I used the stitching lines die, the smallest of the stitching lines dies, and added stitching lines to the edge of my, see if I put it there you can maybe see better, to the edge of my banner. And I also added stitching lines, let's see if you can see here, I've added them here on the patterned piece. So instead of using typical sticky adhesive, we are going to stitch our banner into place. You can see the pattern through the banner, and you can still see your sentiment, but the vast majority of your pattern is totally unobscured. So here I have some embroidery floss, and we're just going to stitch right through everything. Now, this particular banner is just a smidgen narrow for the stitching lines, but you know, once it's all down, nobody's going to be able to really see that the holes go off the edge just a teeny bit. And we're going to go right up along the edge here. This also really gives you an opportunity to use a fun contrasting thread color, or you know, if there's a pattern or a color that you used in your pattern that you wanted to get in one more time, you didn't get the coverage that you were hoping for in the first place, you can add a little extra here in this step, and that way you've got a little more color coverage. Here we go. So that's done. This we're going to put on a craft card base, but I think I want to pop up this panel, so we're going to add a little foam tape. So now, one of the things that I've heard about the stitching lines is you don't like it when the negative sort of digs into your cardstock. I've found a couple of ways to help with that. If you know there's a spot on your cutting plate that doesn't hit as hard, on mine it's right in the middle, you can run your cardstock with your die there in the middle, so it doesn't impress quite as much. There we go. I've also noticed that I use my shim a lot. You don't want to use your shim if you're worried about too much pressure. Make sure to take your shim out. And at least in my machine, I use a cuddle bug. If your machine tends to impress harder with your die face up, make sure it's facing down. So that'll help a little bit. And if you do still get a little more impression than you want, you can always run your pattern piece or whatever through with an impression plate and sort of mask the impression a little bit that way too. So here's option 3, where you have just a snippet of vellum covering up just a little bit of your pattern, just enough for your sentiment, and you've got your sentiment or your pattern. You're really showcasing it. So there you have it. We have 3 different ways to use vellum to soften a pattern, ranging from just barely there to total all over coverage, giving you totally different looks. I hope you play along with this week's challenge. Again, this was Lizzie Jones with Paper Tray Inks Makeup Monday. Make sure to head over to Nicole Hetty's blog to link up your project and see what other people have done. All right, thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.